I used to think my father was my hero. Growing up, it was always just the two of us after my mom passed away when I was 6. He was the one who packed my school lunches, braided my hair with clumsy fingers, and stayed up late helping me with math homework even when he was clearly exhausted from work. Every bedtime story, every scraped knee he bandaged, every birthday he tried to make special, even when we barely had enough to get by, made me believe that no one in this world would ever love me as fiercely as he did. So, I held on to that version of him, even as the years chipped away at who he used to be. Please subscribe to our channel and tell me in comments from where are you watching this video. It started when I left for college. He remarried during my sophomore year to a woman named Diane. She was polished, charming, and had a laugh that always felt rehearsed. But I tried to be kind. I smiled at every family dinner, played nice with her 2 teenage sons, and even pretended not to notice the way she seemed to enjoy subtly erasing traces of my mother from the house. Her kids got the latest gadgets, wore designer clothes, and treated me like some awkward intruder whenever I came home on breaks. My father seemed blind to it all. Or maybe he just didn't care enough to notice. After graduation, I moved back home temporarily while job hunting. I found my old room turned into a yoga space with salt lamps and incense holders. My things were boxed up in the attic. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself family made sacrifices for each other. But that lie started to crack when Diane's oldest son wrecked his BMW and my dad took out a chunk of his savings to replace it. Then came the extravagant ski trips, private tutors, and finally, a quiet conversation at dinner where my father said, "I've decided to restructure the will." At first, I laughed. Restructure? As in how? Then I looked into his eyes and realized he was serious. Completely serious. "Diane's boys need a head start," he said. "You're smart, you're independent, you've always been the strong one. You'll be fine on your own." It felt like my breath had been stolen from my lungs. I reminded him of the countless promises he made, that he was saving for my future, for the bakery I always dreamed of opening, for the house he said he'd help me put a down payment on someday. His expression didn't change. He just said something about life not being fair and doing what's right for the family. That night, I locked myself in the guest room and cried harder than I had since I was a child, not for the money, not even for the betrayal, but for the realization that the man I'd put on a pedestal all my life had replaced me with a ready-made family that saw me as disposable. That everything we had, our memories, our bond, was something he could shelve the moment something shinier came along. But grief has a strange way of turning into something else when you let it simmer long enough. It becomes fuel. I decided that if my father believed I didn't need him, I'd prove him right, but not in the way he expected, not by crawling away, broken and defeated. I would rise, and I would do something he'd never forget. Because when someone takes your future from you without a second thought, you don't just rebuild. You make sure they regret ever stealing what was yours to begin with. And that was the moment my plan began forming. Not out of vengeance, but out of truth. I was going to build something without him. But I'd also make sure he saw every single piece of it, brick by brick. For months after that blow, I didn't know how to process it. My father, the man who once taught me to ride a bike, who used to hold my hand at school plays, had looked me in the eye and told me that the future I was counting on, the inheritance my mom and he had promised me for years, was now someone else's. Kids who weren't even his by blood were handed my dreams, and I was expected to accept it like a grateful afterthought. I stopped calling, I ignored texts, and when he tried to justify it, "They're just children. They've been through so much," or "You're young, you'll figure it out," I didn't reply. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was emotional. It felt like being erased from my own family story, like all the love and sacrifice I had poured into maintaining a connection with him meant nothing. I spent nights crying on the bathroom floor. I stared at the ceiling asking the same question over and over again. How could he? And then one night, when sleep refused to come again, I looked at myself in the mirror and whispered something I hadn't said in years. "You don't need him to build your future." That moment became my turning point. Instead of collapsing, I buried myself in the things that grounded me. I began teaching piano lessons again. I freelanced graphic design gigs from my laptop. I lived lean, rented out my apartment's second room, cut out every unnecessary expense, and poured every extra dime into a savings account labeled Rebuild. But rebuilding wasn't enough, because even though I was healing, a part of me still burned with that quiet, sharp injustice. He had stolen my future, one that my late mother had promised me with love and intention, just to play savior to someone else's children. And maybe it was selfish, but I wanted him to feel what he had taken. And then one day, I found my opportunity. It came in the form of a letter from a firm called Everhart and Wells. An old friend of my mother's had passed away and, in her will, left me a surprising amount of money. Not life-changing, but enough. Enough to open a door I thought had long been closed. You see, years ago, before my parents divorced, my mom and I would talk about opening a community art space, part gallery, part workshop, part music studio. A place where kids and adults could learn, heal, and grow through creativity. She even had a name picked out, Canvas and Key. I took the inheritance I was never supposed to receive, and I made that dream real. I spent a year building it. I hired counselors, artists, musicians, and youth mentors. We offered free classes to kids from struggling homes, hosted weekend events, and partnered with local schools to offer scholarships. My name wasn't plastered everywhere. I didn't make speeches. I wasn't seeking attention. I was creating legacy. But when we were ready for our grand opening, I made one very specific decision. I personally invited my father and his new wife's kids, not out of kindness, out of strategy. You see, I had done my research. Diane's eldest son, the one who received the largest chunk of my supposed inheritance, had dropped out of college. He spent most of his time online, chasing crypto schemes and gaming tournaments. Her youngest daughter was barely attending school and had been in and out of disciplinary issues. The perfect, polished family image my father thought he was investing in was starting to crumble. So I sent them all a glowing invite to the opening gala of Canvas and Key. I even offered Diane's daughter a free spot in our teen creative therapy program. The night of the event, the venue was filled with laughter, music, and light. Guests mingled, young artists performed, and families gathered around exhibits that told stories of transformation and resilience. In the center of it all, a plaque mounted to the wall. For the dreamers, for the silenced, for those who rebuild when their world is torn apart. My father arrived near the end of the evening. I watched from across the room as he stepped inside, stunned by the space. It was beautiful. Warm lighting, colorful walls filled with paintings and poetry, and people from every walk of life sharing joy and creativity. He approached me slowly, not with arrogance this time, but with something closer to shame. "I had no idea," he said softly, eyes darting around. "You built all of this?" I looked at him, really looked. He looked older, not just in the lines on his face but in the weight he carried. "Yes," I said. "I did. With the help of someone who still believed in me." He nodded, then looked down. "I was wrong. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought they needed me more than you did. And in doing that," I said, "you forgot that I wasn't asking for more. I was only asking for what was already mine." He didn't argue. He didn't make excuses. Maybe for the first time he realized that regret wasn't something you could cover with money or justify with guilt. "I don't expect forgiveness," he whispered. "Good," I replied gently, "because this place isn't about forgiveness, it's about moving forward." He lingered a few moments more, taking in the sights and sounds of what I had created, of what he had never believed I could. Then he left. I never saw him again. But here's the twist. A year later, his new wife filed for divorce. Turns out she was siphoning money from his accounts for years. The sports car she bought for her son? Leased in my dad's name. The private school tuition? Unpaid for 3 months before the school finally expelled her daughter. His savings? Gone. And the kicker? The will had been rewritten without him even realizing it, leaving him in legal limbo. Sometimes karma doesn't show up loud or fast. Sometimes it waits quietly, patiently, while you're busy rebuilding your life, and when it finally arrives, you don't even need to gloat. You just watch the dust settle and say, I warned you. Because in the end, I didn't need revenge to hurt him. I let truth do that. And I walked away holding something more powerful than any inheritance could ever buy: freedom, self-worth, and a legacy that was mine alone.